encourage you to settle in, get yourself a glass of water. It's going to be a wonderful hour that you get to hear all the pearls. I'll keep you awake. I promise I'll keep you awake. Well, Speaker, I am going to speak very frankly about the budget document and some of the contents in it. And I'll get my shameless plug in very early, Speaker. I am going to be speaking, in fact, I'm going to read to the Liberals chapters of Focus on Finance 2, a look into Ontario's finance. I will tell you, if you want to read along, you can go to my legislative website, Fedeli.com, and download a copy of the 106-page book. It is a shameless plug, but it's must-reading for young and old. The web address was Fedeli.com, in case you missed it.
We'll have to translate the financial.
Minister, did you enjoy it? Is it your top financial advice to you?
We'll understand the finances. Yeah, we'll have to translate.
Speaker, last week's budget, when presented, we could have seen the right thing done by the Liberals. They could have changed the path that Ontario is on. Over the last several weeks, our caucus certainly has stood here sharing stories about the pain that's being inflicted by the Liberal government on families throughout Ontario. We also heard from the rating agencies, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, but especially heard from the Auditor General. And they all warned us the same thing. Our economy and this government is headed in the wrong direction. Actually, it started back with Don Drummond, who said, when he rang the bell very clearly, you're going the wrong way. You need to, in his words, were drastically change the direction that we're headed. The Auditor General told us, if you don't change the direction, you're going to start seeing the very services that we enjoy in Ontario being, in her words, we're crowded out. And that means there's no room left for them because we're busy paying interest. So what does this government do instead, Speaker? More of the same, more spending, and even more debt. Yet another deficit, Speaker. We are certainly one of the very few subnationals left in the world, especially one with debt annual deficit of this size. This is a massive deficit. Speaker, this government continues to use the province's credit card instead of using their debit card. The budget, if you look carefully at it as we did, it merely announces more of the same, and in many instances, it's a direct re-announcement, a cut and paste, if you will, from what we saw last year. So, Speaker, a great example of that is the $130 billion announcement on infrastructure. If you look in the 2014 budget, word for word, it was already there. In fact, in the discussion on the $130 billion infrastructure budget, they took exactly the same words and plunked them in there and pretended it's some kind of a new announcement. They're out there trumpeting this great news, which is old news, except the only thing that really makes you wonder what the game is that's at foot is in last year's budget. If you look carefully, Speaker, I'll even tell you the page. Page 45 of the 2015 budget talks about last year's budget, 2014 budget. Asset optimization. That's the nice way of saying we're going to have a fire sale of our assets. So if you look very carefully, last year they needed to sell over 4 years a total of $3.1 billion in assets to make it work. That's $1.1 billion this year, $1 billion the next, only $500 million the further year, and $500 million the year after that. So their dedicated funds were $3.1 billion. But now, Speaker, all of a sudden, in addition to the sale of GM shares, the sale of the LCBO headquarters, the sale of the OPG building, now, Speaker, they need a $9 billion sale of hydro to make it work. So in last year's budget, they only needed $3.1 billion, but now, in addition to that, they need the $9 billion fire sale of Hydro One. They're selling public assets to pay for what was already budgeted. This is a shell game, Speaker. They're really using the money from the sale of Hydro One to pay off their mortgage. That's exactly what they're doing, Speaker. It's a shell game. It's a little bit of a switcheroo. Speaker, in the budget last year, this $130 billion that was announced, they needed $3.1 billion. So now that we have this new money coming in, they'll take the money, put it into transit, but then take the money that already was in transit and haul that away. That's exactly what's about to happen here, Speaker, because they don't know how to balance their deficit. They don't know how to balance a budget. This money will be the money that will be used to get them down to the $8.5 billion. I almost want to choke over that amount. It's still $8.5 billion. They'll crow over how great that is. $8.5 billion. They still plan on spending more than they plan on taking in. So without that hydro revenue, Speaker, they're going to take 100% of our hydro, hive off 60%, sell it for $9 billion, and then change the law, Speaker, the law that says you must use the revenue from the sale of hydro assets and put it against the $27 billion mortgage that is held on hydro. So instead of doing that, they're going to change the law. It's in the bill already, Speaker, to change the law that does not force them to follow the law and put the money where it's destined. They're going to use it to bail out their own deficit. So, Speaker, they're going to take the $9 billion, put $5 billion against the mortgage, and $4 billion they're going to use ostensibly for transit, but in reality, take the transit money that was already there and back it out and put it towards their fact that they don't know how to balance a budget if their life depended on it. Speaker, what's going to happen now is you've got $9 billion out of the system. You've got only 40% of that asset left to generate the revenue to pay off the mortgage. So they won't have the revenue. Right now, 100% of that revenue is available to pay off the mortgage. They're not going to have that any longer. So how are we going to pay the hydro mortgage? Well, we know darn well they're going to put their hands deeper and deeper into our ratepayers' pockets and try to dig out even more cash to pay off the bill because they took that money and put it elsewhere. That's exactly what's going to happen. So just on Friday of last week, at 11 o'clock on Friday morning, May 1st, the peak hydro rate went up exactly 15%. It went from 14 cents to 16.1. Now, I know they're not good at math. I understand that. We've seen that in the budget. But it went up 15%, a number they continue to deny. A number they continue to deny.
You can't add, guys.
But it's the fact. 14 to 16.1, a 15% increase in hydro rates. November 1, hydro rates will go up again, according to them, only another 10%. And on January 1, when they take the consumer benefit away, hydro rates will go up yet again another 10%. So 15%, 10%, 10%, all within 8 months, Speaker. That's the reality of the hydro realm that these people have created. I don't know why they continue to use our hydro to cover up the mistakes that they've made, Speaker. So our team was very busy stripping away the numbers, Speaker, and getting to the real numbers. While we were doing that, they were busy stripping away all the transparency that is currently in the hydro sector. So, Speaker, let me tell you a story about what is happening with Hydro One. The moment a single share is sold, Hydro One no longer will be deemed a public asset. That's in their bill, Speaker. That's what's happening. What does that mean to the people of Ontario? Well, first of all, it strips the Auditor General of powers. No more value for money audits from the Auditor General. Let's not have that pesky Auditor General involved in Hydro One any longer. They've seen to that, Speaker. It's in the bill. They remove the right of the Auditor General to look into Hydro One's books. That's gone. Day one. They cut out the Financial Accountability Officer after 6 months. They can no longer begin new audits, Speaker. It's over. No more financial accountability of Hydro One. That's in their bill. The Financial Administration Act is amended to limit our ability to obtain any information on Hydro One. Gone, Speaker. We're stripped of that as well. What's happening here is a wholesale stripping of any access to any information whatsoever, Speaker, about an asset that the people of Ontario own. There's nothing open and transparent about that. Now, it's very clear the government doesn't want us to know what they're up to, Speaker. We had to scrounge our files through the gas plant hearing documents only to find that many were deleted. So, Speaker, they've gone ahead with this Hydro One sale and taken care of that. There's no sense scrounging for anything anymore. None of the agencies have any authority over Hydro One any longer. Freedom of information, no longer available, Speaker, for Hydro One. We don't get to know a thing. Nothing. No freedom of information. Schedule 38 removes Hydro from the Sunshine List, Speaker. We don't even get to see any of the details about their employees. This is one way to stop the flow of information. Cut access. Cut it all. This is their idea of being open in transportation. No more Auditor General. No more freedom of information. No more Sunshine List disclosures. Nothing, Speaker. We get nothing. Let's take it a little farther. Lobbyists don't have to register any longer for Hydro One. My gosh, Speaker, what are they hiding from us? What are they attempting to hide? Schedule 23 excludes Hydro from oversight of the Management Board of Cabinet. We don't even want to know what's going on, Speaker. We'll just let it be. Hydro One is also taken out of the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Speaker, one of the biggest complaints we have in our office, our MPP's office, and I'm quite certain over on the government side as well, they just don't want to tell you about it, are all the complaints we get in our offices on Hydro One. The help that isn't coming. Thankfully, it fell under the oversight of the Ombudsman, who had a scathing report and a revelation which helped families. Finally, families found some relief when this terrible activity at Hydro One was disclosed. Well, they have an answer for that, Speaker. The Ombudsman is no longer available to investigate Hydro One once the first share, one share, is sold. They saw to that in the bill. That is written into their bill. Speaker, if you could imagine the next one, the Integrity Commissioner, gone from oversight over Hydro One. No integrity, Speaker. No integrity commission. But as I said earlier, considering there's no integrity left in the system, you won't need any of those officers, Speaker. At what point, Speaker, does shame kick in? It's shameful that they've taken this most important public asset and hidden from us all of these oversight agencies, every single one of them. They didn't miss a trick, Speaker. No Auditor General, no Financial Accountability Officer, no Ombudsman. No integrity, Commissioner. No integrity, Speaker. No more freedom of information. It's the last time that we were able to find out they spent almost $7 million.
The member for Northumberland Quinte West will withdraw that comment.
Withdraw, Speaker.
Member for Nipissing has the floor.
No more freedom of information, Speaker. This is the last time that we were able to find out that $7 million was spent on consultants for the sale of Hydro One, including $24,000 for the speechwriter to smooth it over in the public. No more sunshine list, Speaker. No more sunshine list. This is the last time we see Sandra Pupatello's six-figure salary.
Okay. I would ask the member for Davenport to come to order. Yeah, you. Thank you. Member for Nipissing has the floor.
Thank you, Speaker. This is the last time we'll see Sandra Pupatello's six-figure salary or know that Carmen Marcello made $728,000 at Hydro. All this now will be done behind closed doors, Speaker, just the way the Liberal government likes it. So I have to ask them, what are you guys trying to hide this time? Speaker, the reviews on the budget are not pretty. Not pretty at all. Moody's offered two words: considerable risk. Others are claiming, quote, a deteriorating fiscal position. Another said the budget document is lacking in detail. Well, of course, Speaker, we've been saying that for years because the midterm numbers and long-term numbers never were in existence. So for a leading financial institution to suggest that the budget is lacking in detail is certainly not an overstatement whatsoever. The worst thing I found, though, Speaker, is in the budget's page 199. This is my favorite one. I've talked about this many times in the legislature over the last few years. If you remember, Speaker, and I'm just going to refer to Focus on Finance because it has the actual wording of the Speaker, of what we saw in that chart. So, Speaker, they can make all the jokes they want. I'm going to read you what was no joke. It was the Ministry of Finance's document that we uncovered during the gas plant scandal that went to their cabinet, their finance minister, and to Kathleen Wynne. It talked about this chart that they dared use yet again, Speaker, on page 199 of the budget, the one that has the fake $24.7 billion deficit number. So here's what they have to say. The Ministry of Finance admits the benchmark of progress, an estimated $24.7 billion, is complete fiction. This is their own quotes now, Speaker. Was never a real expectation. Was a deliberate, I'm quoting from the Ministry of Finance, the secret document that we obtained in the gas plant scandal hearing, and I'm quoting, was a deliberate policy to project a worst-case outcome. It was deliberately misleading. They also admit the path to balance was then drawn from there.
I have to ask the member to withdraw that unparliamentary remark. Withdraw?
I'll try it, Speaker, to parse out the unparliamentary language that was used in the confidential advice to the Premier. The path to balance was then drawn from there, assuming a straight-line trajectory of declining deficits. So what they did, Speaker, is they had this number at the bottom that they themselves call not a real expectation and a deliberate policy, and they need to get to zero, so they drew a straight line and then filled all these in. That's exactly what they did, and they admit it here. They say it was assumed, this is a quote, it was assumed that spending would be constrained to whatever it takes to hit those targets. Somebody laid a ruler, Speaker, across, drew a straight line, and then filled it in and said, that's our budget deficit numbers. Now, figure out how to make it happen. But they also divulged again I'm still quoting, over the medium term, we have notional targets by sector that add up to the deficit numbers, but not yet full plans to deliver on them. For the extended outlook, neither sector targets nor plans yet exist. Then they conclude with, in order to hit the deficit targets, spending growth going forward has to decrease dramatically. Well, we all know what happened after that, Speaker. Nothing. It did not flatline. It didn't decrease dramatically. We saw it go. In fact, spending is up $2.4 billion again this year. So they use that same chart, Speaker, the one that we disclosed here in the legislature. They used that chart again, Speaker, the nerve. It's quite funny. I guess they ran out of charts. They used the same chart again that we outed as a chart that they said was a complete fabrication. That's what they decided to do, Speaker. So, again, they couldn't even make a new fake chart. They had to use the existing chart that they had. So, which leads us to ask the question, why do they continue to make life so expensive for Ontario's families? So the warning bells were ringing all around the minister, all around the premier, all around the government, that you need to do a drastic turnaround, dramatic change. All of these outside financial organizations have said the same thing, Speaker. They should have realized when Fitch downgraded Ontario's long-term debt to AA-, maybe something's wrong. Maybe the way we're going about things here on the other side, maybe you should start to listen. They had to downgrade Ontario. Standard & Poor's has a negative outlook on the province's long-term debt. Not a very admirable position to be in. Moody's lowered their outlook from stable to negative. And again, after reading your budget, there are two words that they came out with were considerable risk. Not their proudest moment. The fastest growing expense item is interest on debt. Going to increase 7% over the next 3 years. So they're taking money that should be going into frontline health care, and they're using that money now to pay the interest on their debt, Speaker. They're taking money out of health care and education and using those funds to pay off interest on their overspending. It's their financial mismanagement, Speaker, alone that's doing that. It's not the tsunami, as former finance minister used to say. The recession ended for everybody else but us, apparently, Speaker. They continue to make it harder for Ontarians to pay their bills. So let's look at some of the